Should I be using nicht or some form of KEIN? And where do these words go in a German sentence? Does the meaning really change if you put nicht in the wrong place? Well, it can be tricky to know how to negate a sentence like this one, for example, can't it? Lots of questions today, but don't worry, we've got the answers. Grüß Gott, hallo, ich bin Billy Badger und das ist Bausteine 3. Herzlich willkommen. Well, we already worked on negation in Bausteine 1 und 2, and now that we're a bit more advanced, it's time to go just a little bit deeper. We'll learn how to choose between KEIN and nicht and figure out exactly where nicht belongs in a sentence and distinguish between clause level and element level negation. We'll also see how moving nicht can change the meaning of a sentence, and finally we'll find out what on earth verbal complements are so that we know how to negate them properly. Well, that sounds like a lot, so let's get started. Los geht's. The first thing to remember is this: you don't really have a choice between nicht and KEIN. In any one situation, only one of them will be the correct choice. And of the two, I think KEIN is the easier because it's really just an article, a negative one. So it will always precede a noun or maybe an adjective and a noun. And to do this, it replaces articles, but only the indefinite article. So if the sentence you are negating has, or the element you are negating has a definite article, you're not going to use KEIN. Let's check out some examples. In fact, 3 or maybe 4 different versions of the same sentence. Das ist meine Flöte. Das ist die Flöte, das ist eine Flöte, and das sind Flöten. So we've got 4 sentences in the nominative. Here, in the first one, there's a possessive adjective, meine. In the next one, we're using the definite article. Then we've got the indefinite article, eine. And finally, we're in the plural, where I'm not using an article, just to state these are flutes. Okay, so which ones can we negate with a form of KEIN? Well, not the first one, because although meine behaves a little bit like an indefinite article, it is not one. The definite article can't be negated with KEIN either. So we can pass over this. The next sentence clearly does have an indefinite article. So this and our last sentence, which doesn't have an article, can both be negated with KEIN. So our negated sentences are going to look a little bit like this. Das ist keine Flöte. That's not a flute. Und das sind keine Flöten. Those are not flutes. These nouns were all in the nominative, but in any other case, like say the accusative, we do much the same thing. Let's take another 4 sentences. Ich nehme meinen Fotoapparat mit. Ich nehme den Fotoapparat mit. Ich nehme einen Fotoapparat mit. Ich nehme Fotoapparate mit. Again, this is pretty straightforward, isn't it? We can only negate these 2 sentences with a form of KEIN, since the noun we're negating is preceded by either the indefinite article or no article. Ich nehme keinen Fotoapparat mit. I'm not going to take a camera with me. Or ich nehme keine Fotoapparate mit. I'll not take any cameras with me. So we should be able to have it narrowed down now when we actually can use a form of KEIN, just remembering that it gets the same endings as the indefinite articles. So it will look a little bit like this in all of our different cases. Hit pause or head over to the Substack for this video. There's a link in the description. In the meantime, let's look at how we use nicht. Let's go back to the sentence we started with. Es findet am Wochenende in Wien das letzte Konzert statt. The last concert is in Vienna at the weekend. Let's try a few things out and see what's possible. It doesn't really make any sense to put it at the beginning or even in the second position before the verb, since this puts our verb into the wrong position. And of course it can't be right at the end because statt is the separable prefix of our verb stattfinden, and nothing can come after that. So this excludes already a few possibilities. Here are our alternatives. Es findet nicht am Wochenende in Wien das letzte Konzert statt. Or es findet am Wochenende nicht in Wien das letzte Konzert statt. Or es findet am Wochenende in Wien nicht das letzte Konzert statt. Or es findet am Wochenende in Wien das letzte Konzert nicht statt. Now all of these, I guess, are possible, but we can distinguish between clause level and element level negation, since in most of the sentences we're negating a specific piece of information in the clause rather than the whole sentence, rather than the whole clause. Can you see what's happening? Now, probably if we were negating just one element of a sentence, we wouldn't necessarily include some of the others, but we'll leave them in there so that the effect is clear. Es findet nicht am Wochenende in Wien das letzte Konzert statt. It's possible the concert is going to happen, but just not at the weekend. Nicht precedes the element it's negating. Let's turn to our next one. Es findet am Wochenende nicht in Wien das letzte Konzert statt. Now again, the concert is happening. It is on at the weekend. It's just not in Vienna, since this is the element that nicht precedes. So you can probably tell what this statement tells us. Es findet am Wochenende in Wien nicht das letzte Konzert statt. The concert's on, it's in Vienna, it's on at the weekend, but it's not the last concert. And you can tell this too by the intonational emphasis when spoken. Nicht das letzte Konzert. So that leaves us with this sentence. Es findet am Wochenende in Wien das letzte Konzert nicht statt. This time nicht is pretty much as close to the end as it can possibly get, since as we said, it can't follow the separable prefix statt. This negates the whole clause, the whole statement, all of the information. The last concert is not in Vienna at the weekend. No priority is given, I don't think, to any particular part of the statement. It's just the whole thing that we're negating. And this is probably, I'd say, the most usual and natural place to put nicht, following the direct object. Let's look at a couple of more examples before we move on. For example, fährt besonders schnell. Kocht sehr gern. Die Musik gefällt mir. Sie hat mir seine Handynummer geschickt. In our first example, we want to say that he drives, just not particularly fast. So it makes sense to place nicht before the part that we want to negate. Fährt nicht besonders schnell. And it's the same story with the next example. If he doesn't like cooking very much, then we need to put nicht before the part that says he does. Kocht nicht sehr gern. Moving on to the next example, the only natural place to put nicht is at the end, since nicht will generally follow our conjugated verbs as well as most dative and accusative objects, especially pronouns. Die Musik gefällt mir nicht. And in our final example, well, where do you think nicht should go? Well, there's not many places that it can, so it will be here towards the end, since we're negating the whole statement, but of course not after the participle. So this brings us to a couple of interesting examples that might be might be a little bit confusing. Let's take these examples. Sie fährt im Sommer Rad. Wollte Klavier spielen. Wir laufen Gefahr, alles zu verlieren. Im Winter läuft sie Ski. Now, if we're negating sentences like this, then we need to recognize that in each example, we don't actually have a direct object, even though it might seem like we do. Instead, what we have are verbal complements, where a noun complements the verb. For example, the verb for to ride a bike is Radfahren, which consists of a noun, Rad, and the verb fahren. And this behaves much as a separable verb. So instead of treating Rad as a direct object, we treat it as a separable prefix. And the same is true for the other examples and other verbs that behave in much the same way. So we might have, sie fährt im Sommer nicht Rad. She doesn't ride a bike in summer. Wollte nicht Klavier spielen. He didn't want to play piano. Of course, there might be situations in which you want to emphasize you're not going to ride any bike or play any piano, rather than talking about bike riding and piano playing in general, in which case you could feasibly say, sie fährt im Sommer kein Rad. She doesn't ride any bike in summer. Wollte kein Klavier spielen. He didn't want to play any piano. And there are some other useful examples too, like these ones, and I'm sure you can come up with a few more examples that behave in much the same way yourself. Wir laufen nicht Gefahr, alles zu verlieren. We're not running the risk of losing everything. Im Winter läuft sie nicht Ski. She doesn't ski in winter. Now, as well as nicht, you can of course use nie to express never or niemals, which does much the same thing. And both of these follow the same rules that we've developed for using nicht. So that's probably enough for today, but let me know, have I missed any important ways of negating? I bet you can think of some. Let me know in the comments below und danke fürs Zuschauen. Ich hoffe, es hat dir geholfen und dass wir uns in dem nächsten Video sehen. Dankeschön, auf Wiedersehen und tschüss.